There are at least 3 ways to build most EDH decks.
Strong, fun,
and mean. Let's look at the strong, fun, and mean ways that I would build Omnath, Locus of Creation, and the video starts right now. Special thanks to our Patreon supporters who power our channel. Check out our Patreon for monthly giveaways, exclusive content, and even a starring role in our fan fight series. Link in the description below. Hello and welcome to the day. Thank you for spending your time with us. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. I am Joel. We have got some spicy new goodness from Zendikar Rising in Omnath, Locus of Creation, and we're going to go through the 3 ways that I would build him. But first, if you would, go down there and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you like the video by the end of it. It really helps us out and it lets me know to make more videos like this. Let's jump over into this commander. Omnath, Locus of Creation. Look at this thing. Not only is this card a beauty, but this commander is a beauty. 1 blue, 1 white, 1 green, 1 red for a legendary elemental 4/4. It says when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Because why not? Let's just tack draw a card onto a commander. That makes it good, right? It does. The answer is yes, it does. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 4 life. If this is the first time this ability is resolved this turn. If it's the second time, add 1 red, 1 green, 1 white, 1 blue. If it's the third time, Omnath deals 4 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker you don't control. This is a pretty incredible commander. Not only do you get access to 4 different colors, but you've got Landfall ability built in. So, strong, fun, and mean. Strong way I would build this, obviously, is a Landfall deck. We want to get 3 triggers of that as much as possible. Fun way is I would build an Elemental Tribal, and mean way, we would go Land Destruction. Let's jump into the strong way. So before we jump into the Landfall cards, I definitely want to talk about Conjurer's Closet. Omnath just says straight up, whenever it enters the battlefield, draw a card. There are not a lot of commanders that straight up, with nothing else required, draw a card when it enters. I think you've got Zagantha, creatures like that, but Corvold would be a close comp, but you still have to sacrifice something when it comes into the battlefield. What I'm talking about is the ability just to straight up draw a card on the ETB. Conjurer's Closet is going to be great in this deck simply because Omnath is going to draw you a card every single time it flickers, and you can also build some good ETB into this on your creatures, especially when you get around to elementals and you're looking at landfall stuff. So let's move into cards like Karametra, God of Harvests. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a forest or plains, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. That's going to start contributing towards multiple land triggers, multiple lands entering the battlefield per turn, which is what you want to approach with this deck. We want that 3rd trigger to go off as much as possible. Ineos and Tiro, same thing. Each player may put a land card from his or her hand onto the battlefield. It's at your end step. You get to draw a card and then put an extra land onto the battlefield. If it's a 3rd trigger, it still would count and deal 4 to each opponent and each opponent's planeswalker. And then obviously each opponent who didn't draws a card if they didn't put a land onto the battlefield. Azusa, Lost But Seeking, is going to let us straight up get there. You may play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. Boom. That's it. Play your first one, play your second one, get 4 mana into the battlefield, into your mana pool, excuse me. Play a 3rd one, 4 damage to everybody. Hello. Exploration, more redundancy on this ability, playing additional lands on each of our turns. That's what we want to do. Dryad of Elysian Grove, you may play an additional land on each of your turns, and this makes all of our lands every basic land type at the same time. So we get kind of double duty out of Dryad. Courser, play with the top card of your library revealed. Play the top card of your library if it's a land. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, you get an extra life. Boom. Courser's been around forever. It's fantastic. Cards like Oracle of Moldiah, you also want to get those. Risen Reef, I like this one because it's got elemental triggers and extra lands. When it enters or another elemental enters, look at the top card. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. If you don't put the card onto the battlefield, put it into your hand. Hello. Keep Risen Reef in mind when we go through elementals later. Knight of the Reliquary. 1 white, 1 green, 1 other. Gets +1/+1 for a land card in your graveyard. Sack a forest or plains. Search for a land card. A land card. Put it into play. Untapped. And then shuffle your library. This is going to at least give you that 2nd trigger of land entering the battlefield for Omnath every turn. Also, keep this card in mind when we go to our land destruction part as well. Genesis Ultimatum. This will hit lands. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. Put any number of permanent cards from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest into your hand. Exile Ultimatum. This is going to hit lands. This is also going to hit other permanents. This is a perfect card for this deck. And then cards like Rite of Flourishing as well. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws a card. Each player may play an additional land on each of his or her turns. This is kind of a group hug aspect. You saw Kenios and Tiro as well. That kind of group hug thing might be a great way to go with lands, with extra mana, with overabundance of mana and landfall, in addition to lots of other strong creatures that have that landfall ability tacked on them. This is just kind of where you want to base your major land deck. Take this base, combine it with some landfall creatures that you like, or just are really strong landfall creatures. Put yourself some removal in there. You've got access to white, you've got access to green. Even red can be some of your creature removal. You've got access to so many. You've got access to every color except black. We'll just put it that way. And so you can do a lot with this deck. You can take this base of this big mana extra lands base and then take it anywhere you really want from there. It's what I love about the versatility of this 4-color commander that has to do with lands entering the battlefield. With a 4-color commander, you would already want to be having a lot of lands on the battlefield, making sure you're hitting your colors, making sure you've got enough mana to cast everything you want to cast, and so kind of sets you up perfectly to take this deck in any direction you want. That's the strong way I would set this deck up. Let's look at the fun way, and that is Elemental Tribal. So if we're going to go Elemental Tribal, we might as well go Omnath Tribal. Let's work backwards through the Omnaths. We've got Locus of the Royal, which is 1 red, 1 blue, 1 green, 1 other. When it enters the battlefield, it deals damage to any target equal to the number of elementals you control. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on an elemental. And if you control 8 or more lands, draw a card. These two in tandem with each other, this is just double Omnath duty. This is ridiculous. If you got both these on the battlefield and you're playing lands and you're making mana, gaining life, drawing cards, putting +1/+1 counters, just triggers out the wazoo. You've also got Locus of Rage, which has landfall built onto it. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 5/5 elemental creature token onto the battlefield. And whenever it or another elemental we control dies, it deals 3 damage to a creature or player. Huge. Nice little board wipe insurance there. And of course, Omnath, Locus of Mana. Green mana doesn't empty from your mana pool as steps and phases end. And it gets +1/+1 for each green mana in your mana pool. Fill that mana pool up. Tap out on green every turn. Even if you can't use it, get Omnath, Locus of Mana on the battlefield, and you've got a big, mean green that is ready to stomp around. Zendikar's Royal, this is another great one. I just included this one instead of in the landfall section because it makes elementals. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 2/2 elemental creature token onto the battlefield. Further triggers for all this elemental stuff. Further synergy for all this elemental stuff. Royal Elemental, blue, blue, blue 3 for a flying 3/2. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may gain control of target creature for as long as you control Royal Elemental. You've got blue, you've got white in your colors. You're able to protect Royal Elemental once it hits the battlefield. And if you're combining this on top of that strong strategy where you've got tons of lands entering the battlefield anyway, you're taking control of every creature on the battlefield if you want. Just make sure you protect your Royal Elemental from leaving the battlefield. Flamekin Harbinger I like a lot because when it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for an elemental card, put it on top of your library. That is fantastic. You can go and get your Royal Elemental. You can go and get your Locus of the Royal Omnath, whatever you want to get. You can go search up Maelstrom Wanderer. This is an elemental. It gives all of your creatures haste, and you get to cascade when you cast the spell. Fantastic. You can also go get Animar Soul of the Ancients. This is an elemental. Pro white, pro black. When you cast a creature, it gets +1/+1. Creature spells cost 1 less for each +1/+1 on Animar. Huge. You know it. You love it. You can also go get Vigor, green, green, green 3 for a 6/6 trampler. If damage would be dealt to a creature you control other than Vigor, prevent it. Put a +1/+1 counter on that creature for each damage prevented this way. And when he's put into a graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into the library. Or you could go get something humble. It doesn't have to be this mean, stompy, all mythics, all rares deck. Lavakin Brawler, when it attacks, it gets +1/+1 for each elemental you control. Get something that's creating a lot of elemental tokens. Make sure that you have gone wide with elementals and you're swinging for a huge Lavakin Brawler here. It's a fantastic way to do it, and it's very humble, you know, it's just on a common. That's a very brief overview of how I would approach Elemental Tribal. Make sure you check out the other video I've got on the channel specifically about tribal synergies in EDH. It goes over a generic view, goes over the artifacts that are good, and goes through each color and tells you what cards might be good for any tribal strategy, with elementals being no exception. So before we go, let's talk about the mean way that I would build this, and that is the dreaded land destruction. Can't talk about land destruction without talking about Armageddon. What do I have to say about this card? 1 white, 3 other, destroy all lands. Your deck is going to be producing lands at a crazy rate. You're going to be searching them up with cards like Circuitous Route. You're going to be playing multiple of them with cards like Azusa, Lost But Seeking. You can afford to destroy your own lands if it's going to slow your opponents down and keep you on the battlefield. Get ahead on the battlefield and then wipe the board of lands. That's pretty much the strategy with this deck. There are multiple ways to do it, and you don't have to go through the entirety of the spectrum. Ruination, 1 red, 3 other, destroy all non-basic lands. There's a ton of solid cards that destroy all lands. Catastrophe, cards like this that are just going to wipe the board of lands. It's basically the strategy. Get ahead, get some of your stuff onto the battlefield that lets you search up lands or play multiple from your hand and you're drawing cards, and then just wipe everybody's else off the board. Look at Price of Glory. 1 red, 2 other. Whenever a player taps a land for mana during another player's turn, destroy that land. If we keep everything we're doing at sorcery speed or on our main phases or combat steps, we're playing against some control player, this is the kind of card that will absolutely hose them and keep them from casting counter spells during our turn. Now, we've wiped all the board of lands. We know that's going to be happening with our strategy. You need to play cards like this. Ramanap Excavator, 1 green, 2 other. You can play lands from your graveyard. This is huge. This may be even good for the versed version, for the strong version, especially when combined with Knight of the Reliquary like I was talking about. Sacking lands, you're bringing them back from the graveyard. You're getting additional plays every turn with some of your other cards on the battlefield. Omnath Excavator is fantastic, as is Crucible of Worlds. This is kind of the OG way to do it. 3 costs for an artifact. You can play lands from your graveyard. Straight up, no chaser. That is the way you want to go with a land destruction deck. Those are my first impressions of Omnath, Locus of Creation. Let's close the book on this new commander from Zendikar Rising. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, if you wouldn't mind, go down there, hit like, hit subscribe. Really helps out the channel with just the click of a button. If you want to support us further, we have a Patreon. The link is down in the description below. We're doing giveaways all the time over there. Just joining gets you access to our Discord, listed in our videos, possibly even in our fan fight series. Lots of cool stuff going on over there. Go check it out and see if you're a good fit. Other than that, I'm tapped out. I'll catch you later.